Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you are. I'm Jimbojo. Welcome to this, episode 2 of the Skeptic Files. This week I'm talking to Ryder of Dinosaurs. He's a fairly well-known member of the Skeptic community, and his channel's not been up for long, but he's a prolific producer of videos. Mostly he's dealt with the flat earth, but the subject that's very close to his heart is anti-vax, so that's what he's come to talk to me about today. He prefers not to show his face on camera, and that's fair enough, so I've just shown a picture of his avatar, and you'll see me nodding sagely along. After all, it's the arguments that stand for themselves. It doesn't matter who's making them. With that, I'd like to thank you for coming, and I hope you enjoy the show. Hello there, Ryder of Dinosaurs. How are you doing?
I'm good, and how are you doing, Jim?
Oh, I'm doing excellently, thank you very much. I've basically asked you along today because this is part of a new program called the Skeptic Files that I'm working on, where I'll be looking at sort of contentious claims by people which are spurious in the extreme. And as you know, I've invited you along today to talk about the anti-vax movement. But before we start talking about that, I wonder if you'd like to introduce yourself to people watching and explain roughly who you are and what it is you do.
Well, I'm Ryder of Dinosaurs. I'm a small YouTuber starting not too long ago. I try to debunk, or at least expose, rubbish on the internet, basically. Mainly on YouTube, but sometimes I get some things online. I haven't done many videos on that. I think just the one covering JM Truth. But you can find me on YouTube and Twitter.
Sure. Well, now I've sort of been watching your channel on and off for about the past month or so. You've sort of said pretty clearly the sort of thing you do. You do a variety of different debunkings of various spurious claims. I did see your video on JM Truth recently. I thought that was very interesting. But in regard to the anti-vax question, which is why you're here today, I wondered exactly how long it's been that you've known that the anti-vax movement even existed.
I've known the anti-vax movement for quite a while, but not as strong as it is right now, and I think that was one of the reasons that led me to make my video. I kept seeing it here and there popping up, other creators talking about it, and it just boiled me over when I start seeing it in the news.
Yeah, no, I think I can agree with you on that, to be honest. Anti-vax is a very great concern to a lot of people. Now, after you found out that this was a thing, how long did it take you to decide what it is that you think about those views? I mean, was it instant that as soon as you saw them saying these things, you thought, well, that's ridiculous? Or was it something that you had to go out and find out about for yourself before you could come to a conclusion?
No, it was instant. It's nothing new that I'm. So how should I put it? It was nothing new, basically. What they were saying, what they were saying is rubbish, and I've had classes in school that actually taught these kind of things. And
Sure.
Back then we talked a little bit about the anti-vaxxers, so it was nothing that I was not aware of, basically.
Okay, fair enough. Now, perhaps you care to tell people listening roughly what your position on it is. I mean, it may be fairly obvious to them, but I'd like them to hear it in your words, if possible.
I'm anti-vaxxers, if that makes it easy for everyone.
Absolutely, no, that's very concisely put. So you're of the opinion, as most people are then, that vaccines work, it's a good idea to get yourself and your children vaccinated, and that people who make claims about it are essentially wrong then, yes?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic. Now, in response to this, what sort of stuff have you done so far? Anything?
Basically for a video for now and talking to people whenever I can. Of course, I'm not like Nathan Thompson, who goes out on the streets and approach them. Do you know vaccines work?
Yeah.
But if I do see a discussion online on a forum or anything like that, I do intervene and I do speak my mind.
Sure. Now, was there anything in particular that made you want to do that? Was it like you'd seen so much of it that eventually you decided that something had to be done, or was there a trigger at all?
I think it's a social responsibility everyone has, basically. It was boiling inside of me, and I had to let it out somehow. And YouTube provided me with the medium to do it.
Yeah, well, I think that's quite sensible. It's certainly the reason that I approach doing what I do, and a lot of the people I know in the debunking community have something similar, which is that they'd seen attitudes and opinions and claims made by people who didn't really appear to know what they were talking about, and the consequences of which essentially were very detrimental on society. And so people felt resentment and anger towards this, particularly when they could explain their position. They felt better than those claim proponents. So they sort of found this anger welling up in them almost, that they had to go out and do something. And so they used the platform of YouTube to present their evidence against that case. So would you say that you sort of broadly are in the same sort of category?
Oh yes, definitely. I had, again, I don't have a medical background or anything like that, but I do have some background back from school, and let's be honest, I'm vaccinated myself, and I never had any issues. And mainly, if you want to point out a main cause why I spoke out, is the consequences. You were right, you're talking about the consequences, and they are quick and they're devastating. And we can see it in the news these days. Unfortunately, every time I open up the internet and look for the subject, all I see is people getting sicker than years ago, and the word anti-vax is always there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I sort of agree with you broadly on that point, essentially, which is that as I sort of looked out, I suppose for me there's a certain historical context as well, of course, because on the one hand, if you look at places like New Zealand and New York as well, they've had measles outbreaks, they've had outbreaks of diseases that previously had been thought to be under control because specifically of this anti-vax movement. But also you look back at history at times when we didn't have vaccines for certain diseases, polio and measles spring to mind, where, as you say, to use your words, the effects were absolutely devastating. And I see the two interacting, and I'm terrified for the potential future of it, because a disease, as you say, can spread so quickly that the effects are much faster and much more devastating than a lot of other false claims, like, spirit science and sacred geometry and all those other things. I think this is a really important thing that needs to be dealt with right now, frankly.
Definitely. 100 years ago, we didn't have the means of transportation, of quick transportation we have these days. Not everyone could afford to ride a train. We didn't have airplanes that could take you all around the world in a couple of hours or something like that. And these can spread so quickly. Not to interrupt you, I've read a quick quote on a forum that I would like to share from a mother. And she was saying, "We're not allowed to bring peanut butter sandwiches to schools to protect those kids who have peanut allergies. So why are children who are unvaccinated, who are potentially spreading a deadly illness around..." let me rephrase, let me read the last part. "So why are children who are unvaccinated, who are potentially spreading deadly illnesses around, allowed to go to school?" I know this is a controversial point between going to school and not allowing the unvaccinated children in school, but it's a matter of health, isn't it? National health, I would actually say.
Absolutely, it's a public health issue. We have a herd immunity specifically because we can protect those people who are unable to take vaccines because of allergies or what have you. But unfortunately, if more and more people don't have those vaccines because of the choices of their parents or whatever, then unfortunately that herd immunity starts to break down. I've got a fellow creator who I work with called AB Science, you've probably heard of, who made a very good analogy about 5 people stood in a line, each with an umbrella protecting them from the rain. If one person for some reason or another is unable to use an umbrella, then the remaining 4 can crowd around and provide the shelter. But as soon as you lose another umbrella, the whole thing becomes ultimately pointless. You don't get that group protection that's necessary.
Yes, definitely. That's a really good analogy. And AB Science is a really knowledgeable guy. I wish I knew half of what he does.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I interviewed him on this show as I think it was the 3rd episode of the Baller interviews that I did. And he was overwhelmingly well informed on everything. He really brought a level of, dignity and gravitas to the subject, which I couldn't have possibly done with the level of knowledge I have compared to him. Now, I suppose in relation to the whole anti-vax movement, be it on the side of anti-vax, or on your side, anti-vax, you might say, who do you think of as important people in that sort of process? Because obviously people know about, Andrew Wakefield back in '97, who essentially triggered all of this latest sort of furore, or it's where this sort of all seems to point back to and stem from. But other people have got, strong opinions regarding other people. I wonder if you have.
No. My main opinion is towards Andrew Wakefield, who was kicked off in a way out of the UK and got onto the US and start spreading this. I don't want to swear, honestly. This rubbish information and misinforming everyone. And you can understand. It's hard to say these kind of things, but it's easy to understand why it would caught in the United States. A lot of those people have never seen a doctor in their life, and I understand that some of them are concerned for their children, and they go by this person who's supposed to be a doctor, or was a doctor, and they go by authority, basically. And then you've got your neighbor saying the same thing, and then you got your friend, a family member, and instead of trusting an actual medical
professional,
yes,
sure.
medical professional, they go and trust their friends. I understand up to a point, but if you look at it, you have to trust professionals all the time.
Quite. I mean, you trust a gas engineer to come and fix your boiler. You wouldn't trust a carpenter to come and do it.
Exactly.
Experts in their field. I think this has been mentioned to me, and I tend to agree with the point, is that the difference between perhaps the UK and the US. Here in the UK, obviously, we're subject to national healthcare. We have free medical healthcare.
Yes.
Whereas in America, for most people, they basically get charged every time they get ill. And I think it's much easier to trust a medical professional when the guy doesn't charge you £5,000 at the end of the visit. Our country doesn't have quite as strong an anti-authoritarian bent as well, so there are a lot more strong anti-governmental people in the United States. It's essentially a cultural thing that's allowed it to proliferate more than it had over here. But it's rather embarrassing that it's linked to Andrew Wakefield, isn't it?
It is, especially because he's from here, isn't he?
Absolutely.
It is, but we do have anti-vaxxers in the UK as well. I did find a few. I didn't put it on the video, but I did find a few, and it's worrying because it's not just the US. You might see it more in the US for those reasons you just mentioned, but it's all around the world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The spread of social media has essentially allowed very bad ideas to get around the world very quickly. And unfortunately, the only way to deal with those bad ideas is with a slightly slower process of education. So it feels like one's fighting a losing battle the whole time.
Well, it worries me that even some Hollywood A-listers go by this anti-vax movement thing.
Mm-hmm. And they have such a large platform, people tend to listen to them even when they shouldn't.
Exactly, because they know nothing about medicine and they still go out and use their huge platform, because let's be honest, any Hollywood A-lister has a huge platform and they go out and dispute these crazy ideas without knowing what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's sad, really. Now, do you have a particular view on how this latest re-emergence of anti-vax came about? I have spoken to quite a few people who've debunked it, and I'm surprised at the number of people who didn't really care. They said they linked it to Andrew Wakefield and what have you, but this sort of recent re-emergence that came of it, they said, I don't really care where it came from, all I know is I want to stop it. But I am interested in finding out what people think in terms of its latest re-emergence. Do you have a view on that?
Yes, I actually do care where it came from, because if you're going to fight it, you have to fight it at the source. And social media was the source of it, in my opinion. I'll explain if you will allow me. Apologies if my English fails me sometimes.
That's fine.
Social media is not a good or a bad thing. It's a tool, and you use it the way you want to use it.
Absolutely.
We all know that anti-vax movements or anti-vax people exist everywhere in the world. Before, they had little means to connect to each other. Even when the internet came about, some people would create websites, but not everyone had the knowledge to do it and actually browse the internet to find those pages, or actually actively looking. Actively looking for those pages.
Sure.
These days, things like Twitter, Instagram, YouTube are made easy for everyone, and it's a point of connection, like the flat Earth, like every other conspiracy theory, UFOs, ghosts, God knows what, basically. So yes, in my opinion, that was the source. So they got hold of a tool that will allow them to spread their ideas, wrong or not, and they found people all around the world who share their ideas, and that made them group together, and that's how it came about. The new vague, or the new wave of anti-vax. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a very coherent answer, actually. Thank you very much. I think people will find it quite informative. I agree with it, broadly speaking, as well. Now, where do you see this going? I mean, your concerns in terms of the harm that it's going to have on society in the future, or whether or not it will expand and grow, or we'll find a cure for it. Do you have an opinion on that either?
I have a hope, honestly. I can't see where this is going. Well, I can't see going into a really bad place if we don't take any measurements to fight it.
Sure.
But in some way, I think governments will have to intervene with schools blocking these kids. Unfortunately, it's not their fault, but they'll have to be blocked. They're endangering everyone else, and some countries I think are already making it mandatory to have vaccines.
Indeed.
So it needs to go that way. And anti-vax will never stop existing, but we can diminish it to a point of irrelevance, basically.
Yeah, I agree.
It's minimize it as much as possible.
Sure. So that was pretty much my next question. What's your personal cure? So I agree with you there. Essentially, it would seem to be that what you are suggesting is that there will have to be preventative measures to stop it spreading. It will have to be either mandated that you take vaccines, or perhaps if you don't take vaccines, that will exclude you from certain areas of society. So, literal geographical areas, so that you can't put a risk on these other people.
Not just that, unfortunately. I think it needs... this is a very, very unpopular opinion, I'm sure. But I think it should take some privileges away. Let's say, for example, you're in the UK and you're getting benefits from an illness you have. If you're an anti-vaxxer and you could have a vaccine that could prevent that illness and allow you to work, you should lose your benefit rights because you're harming yourself.
Well, the issue for me there is, of course, people should have the right to harm themselves. It's just the right to harming other people that I see the problem with.
That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a very fine line between just harming yourself and harming someone else in the process, because with diseases, you can easily spread what you have to others just by walking out the door.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. For me, that's why it becomes something which you can mandate, and which it's why it's something that you probably should have fines for, potentially, or privilege removals, or even custodial sentences, I suppose, potentially, depending on how it's treated. The question should be, is your behaviour having a negative consequence on the wider society? And if it is, how are we as a society going to deal with it? Because it stops being about the individual when it affects society, and your personal rights will have to take second place to the rights of the larger group. It becomes a democratic question rather than an individual personal freedoms question. And as long as you remain in a country which affords you the opportunity to leave if you wish, then saying this is a legal requirement really isn't that big an imposition on people. It's no different than requiring you have a license before you drive a car, really.
It's everything. Going back to that peanut butter quote, businesses are starting to block peanut butter and any nut product in their kitchens when they have it, or in their workplace, because of people with allergies. So why can't we do the same thing for people who are unvaccinated?
Yeah, I think that's a very reasonable comment. In fact, I remember when you posted that, I forget if it was on Twitter or Discord, but I had my little thumbs up to it as well, because I think it's a really good point and it's very well made. Now, speaking of this point, because that was a point for the general public, to any member of the public who comes across, let's say, this conversation and finds out that anti-vax is a thing, what would you like to say to them now? Either where should they go and look? What should they watch? What attitude should they take? You know, you can answer it in a variety of different ways, but I want to know how you think the public should react to the subject.
I think speak with your doctor. I think that would be the best advice I could give. Let's put it that way. Because if you trust your doctor to treat you, to keep you healthy, then that's the right person to ask about these things, isn't it?
Now, on the off chance we were talking about a person who perhaps doesn't trust the medical establishment, someone who has been at the mercy of thousands of dollars worth of bills, say, who else or where else could someone go and look? Because obviously the distrust of doctors and the medical professional is sort of part of the problem in this regard. So perhaps there's some other resource or some other group or place that you can think of that they could go and look if they weren't happy with that as a solution.
Charities, I think, would be the best place, because they're non-profitable, so they have nothing to gain from their opinion of anti-vax, so being anti-vax or otherwise.
Sure.
So a community of people, of educated people who know what they're talking about. Speak with a nurse, speak with anyone in a charity that promotes health. They'll tell you, I'm sure they'll tell you about it. Don't go to woo peddlers. Don't go to people with miracle cures that they can cure cancer with crystals or with prayers. I respect people's belief, but if prayers could cure everything, we wouldn't have doctors.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, and actually, the idea of speaking to charitable or people of a charity is actually one I've not heard or considered before. I think it's a really good idea, because these are people who don't have a vested interest or a profit out of it. They are doing it purely for their own feelings of sort of goodwill or helping, right? I think most people trust charity workers in general, so going to a charity that deals with this sort of thing, I think, is a fantastic idea. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Now, how would you rate the response of those who have responded to anti-vax? Because we belong to the Skeptic community, you might say. They're a large group of people who, one way or another, address bad claims. And there are plenty of people who have addressed these claims within our community. Do you rate the response you've seen so far as good, bad, middling, insufficient? And what advice potentially would you give to other people in your and my position who want to spread this information?
Well, the answer from the community has been really good, actually. Every time I speak about this anti-vax movement and what we should do about it, it's been good. Do I think we've done enough to fight it? No. I think instead of flat Earth videos, we should be doing anti-vax videos. We should leave the flat Earth for a while, and focus our fight in the anti-vax. Sure. Because it has a more immediate effect on society, and like I mentioned before, we see it every day in the news, or most days in the news. So, as a community that we debunk silly ideas, it's our responsibility to fight these.
And the more serious the silly idea, the more we should fight it, presumably, and the more we should concentrate on it.
Yes, especially if it's affecting a large number of people, innocent.
Yeah, I think it's a very urgent problem that we need to deal with. And though Flat Earth has been entertaining for a good while now, we really ought to leave it alone. Well, not leave it alone. That's not fair, actually. What I really think is that, have you ever heard the argument some people make against the space program, that we have so much poverty here on Earth, we should be concentrating on that before we go to space?
Yes, I've heard that.
Okay, but have you also heard the argument that the reason we need to keep concentrating on space is because they are providing the equipment that tells us about global warming and thus can give us an indication of a thing that's going to happen in our future, right?
Yes.
So the idea here that I have is, rather than saying, oh, we should concentrate on this one rather than this one, we should simply try and make sure that those of us in the community who are doing debunks and who are being skeptical try and have as broad a range of ideas as possible, and that those ideas are attacked with the level of importance that you think they deserve. Because I think diversifying the fight against all of these different kinds of woo and all of these different bad ideas is more important than concentrating on the ones each individual thinks of as better. We need a united front on diverse topics, if you see what I mean.
Oh no, I totally agree. Not everyone is made out to fight anti-vaxxers. God knows I'm not. I did that video. I want to do another, but I think I lack the actual knowledge to go further. That was just an outrage video I made, so just to get it out, basically.
Sure.
Because, like I said, we should be doing more, but I'm guilty of doing flat Earth videos, because if you look at my channel, most of them, if not all but one, are flat Earth. But people who have the knowledge, who know what they're talking about when we talk about anti-vax and how vaccines work and how they, how they should work and everything.
Yeah.
Those people should do a bit more than I've seen.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think that's a good comment, which is essentially, if you have the ability to debunk something that is as clearly important as anti-vax, you should make an extra effort to do so. It may be more fun to do things like flat earth, but really being a skeptic and applying back to, these ideas and making videos about it is fundamentally quite an important thing to do. You are disseminating information which may ultimately even save lives. I know that's quite grandiose, but it has positive effects, and you need to maximize those and make them more efficient.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, well, look, this is coming up onto my last question now. What I really want to ask is your personal favorite argument. It's one I've used in other interviews that I've done as well, but you see, the problem is that everyone's got a slightly different opinion of the same attitude, which is that anti-vaxxers are foolish, it's a terrible idea. And though a lot of ideas that I hear from people are the same, everyone has their own personal favourite argument as to what they try to say to convince people. Now, do you have your own personal favourite argument against anti-vaxxers? Or perhaps you have a favourite resource you like to point them to? You can say, listen, I think you're wrong and this is the best place to find out, or I think you're wrong and this is why.
I think it's an actual counter-argument, basically, because one of the arguments I hear a lot from anti-vaxxers is, 100, 200 years ago, we didn't have so many vaccines or any vaccines, and we were just fine. What I say back is, yeah, you're right. 200 years ago, we didn't have these many vaccines, or most people were not vaccinated, but our life expectancy was, 30 years, 40 years old?
Yeah, quite.
So look into, what I say basically is, yeah, fine, you looked into anti-vax and all the vaccines. Now look into what made our life expectancy grow from 30 or 40 years old to what is it now? 95 or something like that?
Yeah. The life expectancy in the United Kingdom is on the order of 75 years. It's a little less for men than for women, but it's virtually double what it used to be in the past. And that, in my view, is a direct result of our medical improvements over time. I would say, when it comes to this question, my view has always been that anti-vax is one of those great things which, even though it's technically a scientific subject, one of the best arguments for it is a historical one, rather than a direct analysis of the chemicals or the science that goes on behind it. What you can simply do is point to the numbers of instances of diseases in the past, point to the time at which vaccinations were rolled out, and then examine the numbers of how those diseases were prevalent thereafter. And the graphs always show the same thing. Polio, rubella, whooping cough, measles, endless diseases, smallpox, endless diseases were, if not eradicated, then virtually so, or at least in the West where we live, because of this massive program of vaccinations. And it is only because of that that people are even well and healthy enough to live in a society where they can argue with it. So just read a history book about these things, or talk to someone who had polio, because we still have people alive today who suffered that back in the 50s, and they will tell you just how important vaccination is.
Yes, I totally agree. And one of the reasons that led me to use some not public friendly images in my video was try to convey that. Look how a child looks like when they have this disease, when they have measles. Because people sometimes, they're so desensitized from what they see on movies, they don't realize what exactly looks like in real life.
Yeah.
If you, unfortunately, you can do this now, especially in the United States, but not just. Get yourself to a hospital and go to a ward when you have a child with measles, and you see what they look like, how the child is suffering. Look at someone with polio, ask them and talk to them how their life was changed by polio and everything. People need to feel the real life examples, or else just letters on a keyboard, letters on a screen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes I feel the best way to get someone to stop being an anti-vaxxer would be to strap them into an iron lung for a few weeks and just see how long it takes for them to say, all right, I get the point, let me out now, vaccinations are fine.
There is a Dr. House episode that he deals with an anti-vax mom. And his response is just brilliant. I can't actually recall the whole thing, but I hope you can find the video and add it to this chat.
I'll add a few second clip of it.
It's a small clip, but it's so good.
I've seen it. It's on the money, isn't it? It's just spot on. Yeah, I'll put that little video after we've just finished talking in a moment. I'll play a few seconds of that, and hopefully it won't give me a copyright strike, just so you know what Ryder's talking about. But he makes a good point. It's a funny little clip, but it makes the point so expertly as well.
Yes, and it's a slap on the face, because the way he answers it is. But I think people need a slap on the face when it comes to anti-vax.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And on that one, I think we'll sort of end the conversation. So I'd like to say thank you very much. You've given me some valuable insight into this. This new program, the Skeptic Files, for me was actually a way to branch out of flat Earth. I see it as a sort of dying industry of charlatans anyway, and I always wanted to cover a broader range of subjects. So I'm very pleased that you found time to come and talk to me about this, which I think is a very important subject. Now, before I let you go, I wondered, is there anything else that you want to add to the debate, or is there something that you'd like to advertise to people? Like, have you got any new videos coming out in the future that you want people to look out for, or are there any other content producers you'd like people to look for? Anything like that?
I advise any skeptic creator like yourself. AB Science is really, really good. You've got Team Skeptic, who actually got me on indirectly onto the Skeptic YouTube videos and everything. Although initially it was Jimmy, the Mr. Atheist.
Mr. Atheist, yeah, he's great.
He got me on Flat Earth, but Team Skeptic actually got me hooked on it. Yeah. The way he delivers is just brilliant.
Oh yeah, he was one of the first skeptics I was watching. In fact, it was when he had that little episode with Daniel Pratt that I was particularly most impressed with him and the work he was doing. I think that was the point it really sort of triggered in me the desire to do something within the skeptic community as well, even though technically, of course, what I do isn't really debunking, it's just talking to people who do.
It doesn't matter. Everyone does their debunking in their own way. I'm not very scientific. If you've seen my videos, I rarely use any mathematics at all, but I go by what I can find. With the case of GM Truth, for example, I found contradictory information that he himself provided, or sometimes information that I can find that contradicts what he says, and that's how I do it. I don't go into the equations of gravity or the circle of the earth or whatever. Although I know maths, I've done maths in the past, it's an area I don't want to dive into, basically.
Yeah, I think it is. A lot of people that I know are not that au fait with complicated mathematics, and consequently I think that presenting it to them really beyond basic sort of arithmetic is a foolhardy endeavour, because you're alienating them. You're taking away from them an aspect of the conversation they might have otherwise understood, because you're presenting it in a language that they're not really comfortable with, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, not to make this conversation longer, because that belongs in a flat Earth video. But when we do flat Earth videos, we don't do it for the flat Earthers. We're not trying to convince them anymore, because we know we can't convert someone like Nathan Oakley, Daniel Pratt, or JM Truth, or anything like that. We're just exposing to the people on the fence.
Yes, that's right. That's why I do what I do as well, is I'm trying to present the case not to try and convert people, but merely to stop people from getting the wrong idea in the first place. I want people who might be on the fence or don't know any better or something like that to have both sides of the argument presented, and I want to present the better case.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Lovely. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming to talk to me then. Oh, you're perfectly welcome. If you've ever got anything in the future that you'd like to bring up, then please do get in contact with me. I'll be more than happy to have you back on the show. For the short term, though, I think what I'll do is I'll say goodbye to all of the people watching. Thank you very much for coming to join this conversation. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions yourself, please get hold of me in the chat or on my Twitter or Discord. If you think you have something you'd like to present on the Skeptic Files as well, then please do the same. In the meantime, I hope you have a good morning, afternoon or night, wherever you are. This has been the Skeptic Files, and thank you for coming. Goodbye. And goodbye to you as well, Rider of Dinosaurs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.